have probably a variety of different journeys getting here. So maybe raise your hand if you had your power out at any point during Hurricane Sandy. Okay, raise your hand if you know people who did. Raise your hand if your space got flooded at any point. Raise your hand if you know people whose stuff got flooded. Raise your hand if you had to help somebody whose stuff was ruined. Raise your hand if you lost stuff during this hurricane. Raise your hand if you missed work during this hurricane. Or school. A couple of principles that we use to guide the work that we do out of here. One is anti-oppression and one is mutual aid. Both of those principles have kind of internal and external implications.
I think it has been said, and I think most of us that are looking and watching this video are pretty clear that we are living in interesting, fascinating times, sometimes devastating for some, other times it's moments of critical consciousness that are being arisen within these devastations. So people that generally were not thinking about things in a broad perspective are forced to think about things intimately, in a completely different way. So this is where we are today. So today with me, if you're watching this, you're watching again Thinking Without Borders, and I'm accompanied with, to my right is Messiah Rhodes, and Messiah is a young, producer, a young videographer, somebody that wants to he wants to be able to sort of capture the beat that's on the street, but much more than that, also he has a vision of where we need to be going as well. And to my left is Jason Harris, and Jason is an organizer. And Jason is also someone that is looking to break the mindset of tradition in organizing and how people look at each other, how people communicate, so which falls in line with our thinking, the two of us. So all three of us are pretty much in that line of thinking and looking at ways in which we have to communicate differently. So gentlemen, welcome. Messiah, welcome. Yeah. Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead, Messiah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that when you told me about this, we need to build our media from scratch. We need to build up, real alternative. I mean, people say work within the system, but when it comes to media, I mean, you can't put a pond in the ocean. You have to make your own body of water and create from that. So
And I think one thing that is very clear, if anything, the technology won, but Occupy Wall Street has shown much more than anything else that we are all media. We don't have to be sitting in this building. Anybody that has a camera, anybody that has an opinion, anybody that has a vision can connect words with technology, and then you have that. Jason, so how are you?
Absolutely. Today? Absolutely. I'm good. Thanks for having me. I think that, there's been many experiences that I've had since Occupy Wall Street. When I arrived on the scene October last year, not this past October, but the one before, that just made me see how desperately off our mainstream media really is, and how it really doesn't capture a lot of what's going on the spot. I think that one of the greatest examples of that is just this past moment that we had in New York City was Occupy Sandy, and how different what was being portrayed in our mass media was from what was really happening.
Hurricane Sandy.
And
the way Occupy.
Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah. What did I say? Superstorm Sandy. How differently it was, on the ground in different true communities in and around New York City, as opposed to the ones that as opposed to what was basically given out to the world. So
what's happening to us, and as we well know, every one of us are very clear in terms of the economic devastation that's happening around the world. And I think what we are seeing is the absence of a counter opinion, mm-hmm. and we are seeing countries that were first world, second world countries, and they've done what they were doing. They've done to their countries and their governments what they were doing to governments of the third world. So which was the indebtedness, so debt becomes the element of enslavement, mm-hmm. to population. So this continues, and what we're seeing now, there is a confluence of big events, in other words, big major crisis economically, mm-hmm. and now we're seeing hurricanes, what we saw in Katrina. We saw devastations in other countries such as Haiti, and Chile had some issues, but look what happened to Japan, and people are not even quite sure what's still happening over there. But Messiah, one of the things that you've been able to do is on your video, you capture some of that reality. So we're showing that, and we're going to be showing it as we speak. So I want you to speak to us about it and what you saw, how it felt, and then as we look towards what is the out, where do we go, afterwards. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in Far Rockaway. I was born and raised in St. John's Hospital near Mott Avenue in Carnegie. So that's like my birthplace. So when I went back there, I mean, it just felt like things got worse. Like I remember I went to elementary school with Gregory Meeks' daughter. It wasn't as dystopian as people made it out for Rockaway to be. Like it was a working class family atmosphere there within the poverty. People I guess people say the good part, segregation. I mean, that was the remnants of that in Far Rockaway. That's how isolated it was. It was a black community, but at the same time it was sustainable. But into the mid-90s, into the 2000s, that pretty much all deteriorated, I remember realtors going door to door, pretty much asking if people want to like get out for, a couple of $100,000, So when I went back to Hurricane Sandy, I went back to Far Rockaway. It's pretty much the aftermath. It felt like, the destruction was done already. This is the post-apocalyptic world that people talked about. You go to Far Rockaway after Hurricane Sandy.
Boardwalks
destroyed. We had Homeland Security. It was pretty much people. We went to interview people, and they pretty much said that National Guard, Homeland Security, the police, they weren't there to help people. They were in patrol mode. They were driving around with those big guns on top of the Hummers and stuff. I don't know what kind of community building that was.
How does that help?
That doesn't help at all. It doesn't. I mean, it put fear into people. We talked to one older woman who's leaving the neighborhood just because of that. It wasn't because she was stranded in a building, but she went out. It just really messed her head up. It gave her. But the dog sickened people in the 60s. That's the kind of image that she had when she saw that. But
and that's a factor that's very sickening. I mean,
yeah. But in the video, pretty much, I mean, in the media gives an impression that, Occupy Sandy was just like people from outside that came in and did all this stuff. It wasn't like that at all, and you can go to independent outlets even more and see that, But it was people from the bottom up. It was people from within the community that went to their church and say, hey, can I, use this to start giving out food and start giving out batteries and stuff like that. It was people within the community that did that. And Occupy Sandy brought that network of the new kind of organizing towards that, and that's what I saw happen, And even though through this devastation, you can go almost every 5 blocks, every 10 blocks, there was it was a soup line, there was a clothing line, that's how done it was. But people were together, people who were never organized in their life were there helping people, and that's what I saw in Far Rockaway, and that's what continues to happen, even though 10,000 people are still without power as we speak.
Which is incredible, and especially as we're moving now towards, we're pretty much in the winter as of December 21st.
Yeah.
So that's a very devastating situation.
Yeah.
Now, I have noticed that there's been some money given by FEMA. People have received monies for their homes.
It's been a mess. I mean, FEMA, if your apartment got wrecked and you're going to go back to the apartment, then I think you get some sort of winter compensations. But there's some people who don't want to go back there, and they get nothing. They don't get nothing for the stuff they lost. They don't get any of that, And that's happening pretty much in Jersey too. It's happening in pretty much all the devastated areas. People are not getting compensated for their possessions, So.
So again, for people that don't know, I mean, areas that have been affected, if we want to start at the tip, it's Breezy Point, which is, of course, in Long Island, in affluent communities, and then you can bring it down to, bring it down to Far Rockaway, and you keep going down to Rockaways proper.
Edgemere.
And then I think there's a little bit of a coming off Exit 11. I'm not quite sure I forget the name of that community, but
like Redfern houses or
right. When you get off Exit 11, you make a right. That's part of the Rockaways, but I think there's a name for it. It escapes me.
Howard Beach.
No, it's not Howard Beach. Howard Beach is a little bit after. But when you get over, if we continue down still, it's Coney Island and all this area, and all the way down, it goes to Staten Island. So all that whole front side, which is of course usually consider it as prime property, today it's no property. It doesn't have any value. I don't think they can sell it around the corner. They wouldn't be able to sell anything. So pretty much their homes and everything that they've worked for has been destroyed, and it has covered pretty much all different social,
Yeah, exactly.
economical, and it's a huge equalizer, as Jason was saying just a few minutes off mic. So speak to us about that. You've visited other places? Your father was affected in Canarsie.
Yeah. I mean, I stay in Jersey right now, so we were stuck in Jersey for like a week after a few days after Sandy. So we saw that part in Jersey. We saw we pretty much learned local politics in Jersey City the hard way. We was trying to do organizing. We was trying to do this volunteer canvas in a deeper, more low income communities.
Give people the idea what's canvassing. What does that mean?
Pretty much doing with the hurricane relief stuff. It's pretty much going door to door asking people, do you need something? Do you need medication? Is someone here in the neighborhood that hasn't seen anybody? It was pretty much asking the needs of the community door to door. It wasn't just taking the old school kind of door knocking, come to a protest. It was actually, mutual aid for people, even if it was just talking to somebody who haven't seen anybody for like a month after Sandy, the kind of stories that was happening. So we go to Jersey City, and pretty much we were trying to go to more deeper in the low income communities, and we pretty much got picked up by police. We had one of our canvassers picked up by police because they felt the neighborhood was too dangerous for them to be out there, to be knocking on doors, and they took them away. And it pretty much scared a lot of newcomer people who wanted to help. That scared them, they didn't want to be a part of that, so they went and helped people who had doormen, So, so that pretty much happened in Jersey City, In Jersey City, I feel that it's a technocratic, capitalistic, this is their dream come true is Jersey City. It's pretty much the financial controllers who work in Wall Street.
Down the water.
Live here,
Right.
Goldman Sachs is there. So this is like their
Merrill Lynch is there. A lot of others are there.
This is their dream city, of which, their charity is giving out $100 gift cards, which happened a couple of weeks ago. This is what they feel helps the community. So we were in Jersey City. I saw that, and it was a little too much for that. And eventually, people got power and stuff like that. So that's when I went to Far Rockaway. So that was what happened in Jersey City. So.
Well, hold on a second. Let's get Jason involved in this. Jason, you've had some experiences. Your experiences stem from Staten Island or in other parts also of the city? Give us some idea.
Originally, I ended up being upstate New York in a town called Otisville during the storm, I would say, and we actually were without power almost immediately when any kind of weather that came with Occupy Sandy started coming through, and I made it back to New York about 4 or 5 days after Occupy Sandy came to the East Coast. And I am from Massachusetts, so I am not I don't have really, sentimental neighborhoods and things like that I am familiar with in and around the boroughs of New York. And I have a lot more to learn about New York itself. But for me, that was interesting and it was good, actually. It allowed me to really zoom out and to take a look at, in a very broad way, how this storm was affecting different people differently. And what it was really based on was a socioeconomic, from a socioeconomic standpoint. This storm affected different community members differently, and I think that some of the vulnerabilities and some of the strengths were really exposed. I think it exposed a lot. And yeah, I did say that it was a great equalizer. Suddenly, large numbers of people were without food, without heat, without plumbing, without some of the very basic things that they needed. And thankfully, Occupy Sandy stepped in and had broad networks that they still have in place due to Occupy Wall Street, and it was just a matter of
Tapping
a few
into
keys and tapping into it, and thank goodness.
Were you in Staten Island for a bit?
They
Because
showed.
you're in Staten Island.
I live in Staten Island,
Right.
so I have had an opportunity to go along the easternmost coast of the island and take a look at some of the devastation, and I also spent some time in Red Hook. Now, you know, they're very different populations, racially,
Right.
socioeconomically,
Correct.
in the resources that they have access to, and the way that it seems that relief came into these neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods, and now, you know, talk about the financial district.
What kind of relief did you see? Was it food relief?
I saw it. There were lots of material goods. There was lots of food and lots of, you know, things that were streaming in from around the country. But there was no
Blankets, comforters, things like that.
things like that. Food, lots of bottled water and stuff like that. But there was nobody to distribute it. Thankfully, Occupy Sandy. There was certainly not FEMA. There was certainly not Red Cross. There was certainly not, I don't know, the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or the Cub Scouts. I mean, it was people. It was people helping people, and people really being able to identify with people in a way that they typically don't, because it was basic needs.
So, in essence, what we are seeing is the breakdown of these institutions that are usually billions of dollars. FEMA is $1 billion operation, Homeland Security $1 billion operation, and they are not effective on the ground to help people. They're not there to help people.
Well, I think that people have a certain responsibility in a situation like that to roll up their sleeves and help their neighbor.
Right.
I really, you know, I don't know that I don't know that it's absolutely fair to just say we would really need an army to move in to kind of meet the needs of the people, where, and I guess the people that are living in these communities just wouldn't be responsible.
Well, I don't think
you know,
I don't think we're saying that also, Jason. But what we are saying is that you want governance to have a certain, if they're going to be facilitators to help people in crisis. But what you're saying, the other part that you're saying, which we totally agree with, is generally speaking, these communities are not really working together. These communities are not dynamic in terms of people talking and working with one another. And then, boom, a crisis happens, and people are forced to talk to each other.
Sure.
They're living in the same building. They're not communicating with each other. This is not like other countries that are pretty much a homogenized sort of society in which everybody speaks the same language, everybody has the same culture. This is completely different. In almost all these areas, they are forced to sort of have discussions. Maybe Staten Island is much more monolithic, or maybe it's much more one type of community from what I gather.
Well, it was very interesting to go from from community to community, and I think that the people were doing what people do. I think that Occupy Sandy came through because of the networks that they had in a very beautiful way. But I think that what was most interesting to me was to see from community to community people who were suddenly. I was in Staten Island in a area that is mostly Republican, I would say, mostly to Tea Party. Actually, is one of the was one of the last representatives that they put in Congress, and their motto is almost take self-responsibility, and to do pull yourself up by your bootstraps and things, and suddenly.
They had to.
Mother Nature,
right.
And suddenly it's like, they find themselves for all for all the right reasons, dependent on, like you were saying, an institution that they were suddenly in a bureaucracy that some folks in maybe Red Hook are very used to are having to depend on in some way, shape, or form, and they hated it. And what was most interesting to me was thinking about what would it take to fold these two these two seemingly different people's experience together, because in a lot of ways they're both being attacked by the same dog. A lot of the people.
They came from a different perspective, though. And
from a different perspective, right.
Feel free to come in on this. Don't wait for me to sort of. We don't need to do that anymore. We've done the introductions. So
the wages are decreasing in Staten Island in this community, and they feel that. They are paying large amounts of their money into insurance companies that are trying to figure out how to not reimburse them. They are. They're working 2 and 3 jobs where they used to be able to work 1 to keep what they have.